Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Maine Planning Basics Webinar series. My name is Tom Mariola, and I'm a senior planner with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program at MOCA, Maine Office of Community Affairs. These monthly webinars are intended for those that are new to the planning profession. A reminder that these sessions are recorded and posted to our website. I will post a link to that page shortly. Next month, November, we're gonna skip a month, so we're gonna call off November. We have NECAPA at least 2 days that week. It's also a holiday weekend, kind of. It has Veterans Day the following. It's not till the following Tuesday, but I'm not sure about attendance. And then we also don't have a topic yet. So the only topic we've heard is potentially something on or specific to abandoned roads, discontinued roads, lost roads, paper roads, that sort of discussion. It was briefly touched on. Looks like I went back and looked at some of these recordings back in last September, I believe, of 24, but only very briefly with DOT on one of our sessions. But I think I think it's a fine topic area. I just probably hold that off till December. But if anyone has anything else, we're wanting to build the calendar out really through the winter if we can. Today, we welcome Samantha Horn, Director of the Maine Office of Community Affairs. She was the Director of Science at the Nature Conservancy and worked leadership roles at the Maine Land Use Planning Commission. I hope everyone has lots of really tough questions ready to go. We can keep Samantha on her toes. Sam, thank you for joining us, and you can get started whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. It's so good to see so many friendly faces and names here, people that I've known for a while, and then folks that I haven't met before. So this is terrific. I'm hoping that we can do something that's a little bit interactive today. I can talk a little bit about the formation of MOCA and what we're hoping to accomplish, but really there's been a fair amount of information out there, and I'm not sure how much people already know and what areas you're most interested in learning about. So I hope that you can give me some guidance as we go here about which topics you'd like to hear about the most. And also, I'm really interested, especially since most of you are in the planning community, to hear your thoughts about what we should be focusing on or what would be the most useful. So I really welcome feedback as well as providing information. So the Maine Office of Community Affairs is a new agency in state government. We're not a part of any other department. We are a freestanding agency that reports to the governor. And we're composed of the State Resilience Office, which got started last spring, and also 7 programs coming from 6 different departments in other agents or in government. So Tom and Ashley and Joan are part of the Municipal Planning Assistance Program, which was in the Department of Ag Conservation and Forestry until last week, and that moved over. And 6 other programs did as well. And so what we're doing is reforming a one-stop shop for communities from pieces that have been sort of scattered in state government over time. And what we heard from communities is that it was confusing to find the services that communities needed, weren't sure which department to go to, weren't sure exactly who to ask questions of. And also that there was sometimes not great coordination between some of the programs, especially the ones that didn't have other reasons to interact on a regular basis. So it's both to bring together staff to work together more closely, and also to create a place where communities can know, okay, I can go here and ask the question first, and then those folks will help me figure out where to go from there. We're looking at coordinating things like funding opportunities. So that means making it easier to find funding opportunities. We're working on a database of funding opportunities for communities to search. We're also talking internally about how we can work across funding programs to make application processes more coordinated and smoother, and also think about ways that we can coordinate the purposes of the funding programs to amplify the goals that those funding programs are trying to reach, and to make it easier for communities to understand where they can apply for different kinds of needs that the communities have. We're thinking about that with technical assistance. We know that there's lots of great technical assistance documents out there. They just happen to be hard to find in many cases. And there are some holes too where we need to develop additional technical assistance materials. But I know that, for example, some of the regional councils have really excellent guides or model ordinances or lots of different kinds of publications that if you're living in one region, you might not think to check the website of a different region's RPO to find those resources. And likewise, there may be more privately available or nonprofit driven resources. And so we're working to figure out how we can bring a lot of those materials together so they're easier to find. And also we're working on an approach to having it'd be easy to call us or email us to just ask the question of where do I go? So we'll have a central phone line where you can call us, and we won't always have the answer at our fingertips, but we will try to make it so that you're not calling 6 or 7 different people to try to find the answer. So with those as sort of overarching goals, there's lots of variety in the programs that will be in MOCA. Code enforcement will be with us, and the coastal program, or are with us now. There's just a wide range. There's housing, and there's land use, and there's flood prevention, and also national flood insurance stuff. So there's a lot of the placemaking, a lot of the how do communities achieve their goals with regard to development, with regard to thinking about what their community is going to look like in the future. We aren't really that closely tied into health and human services kinds of functions. So we really aren't coordinating with sort of general assistance functions or public health functions, although there will be times when those are important for us to collaborate with on a particular project. And many times public health is related to how a place is developing. So I do see there are connections there. It's not going to be quite as tight a link as, say, we'll be really tightly connected with DEP and with DOT, because there are so many links there between the kinds of work that the programs in MOCA do and what DOT and DEP, and to some degree DECD as well. So just to give examples of where we're sort of going to have closer connections and then maybe just more looser connections. And where we're at in our process of bringing all those functions together. Some people have said, well, is it like the state planning office? And I would say it's like pieces of the state planning office, in the sense that we're really focused on funding and technical assistance, where the legislature and the governor did not put some of the more some of the knotty policy issues in our shop. So we're not deciding which dams get to be built. We're not deciding on solid waste issues. We don't have the state economist. Some of the things that used to really raise concerns for folks didn't land with us. So we really are focused on technical assistance, funding, and service. So I think it's going to be a great combination of duties that will put us squarely in a service role, and I think will help us with longevity and with having close relationships with communities and with service providers. So we officially merged last week because we were in the Part 2 budget. So I don't know if you all follow the state budget cycle, but there was a part of the budget that was passed in March that went into effect for July 1. And then there was another part of the budget that was passed in June, but because they didn't get 2/3, it had to have a 90-day wait. So we merged at the effective date of that Part 2 of the budget, the 24th of September. It's made things complicated on a financial level because everybody's transitioning in the middle of a fiscal year. So we're right in the middle of dealing with rewriting contracts and figuring out how the money moves between agencies. We have had the movers in. We still have like random furniture all over the office. We're in that stage of really the messy middle of actually doing the forming. But by mid-November, that's our goal for when we'll have a phone line up. We'll be pretty much settled. We'll be in a good place to really start to offer the kinds of services that we are aiming for. So I think, so keep an eye out for more information as it comes out over the next 6 weeks. But by middle of November, we really are aiming to be available to you as you have questions and to help get you to the right place. I think some of the things that we are going to be able to accomplish that maybe we couldn't have before are some of those things that take people from lots of different disciplines to all collaborate on. And we're seeing that in the office already. The way our desks are set up, people from different programs are talking to each other, which is producing tremendous benefits, because before somebody gets going down the road on one policy change or a legislative idea or a funding idea, they can just say, hey, how does this affect your program? How would communities integrate like this piece and this piece? Can we make it simpler for communities up front? And that's been really tremendous to see. I also think we'll have the ability to raise issues in ways that are uh, have some gravitas in state government to get some stuff fixed, hopefully, because we'll have multiple programs and multiple interests all coming together in one place to try to solve these problems. So we're going to have the Development Ready Advisory Committee, which is something that used to live theoretically at the land bank for a couple of years and was never formed there because it wasn't a great fit there. And what it is there'll be a multi-stakeholder, a number of different state agencies plus stakeholders all coming together to say, how can we provide coordinated technical assistance to communities when we look at all these different perspectives, from the DOT perspective, the DECD perspective, the DEP perspective, IF&W, all the programs in MOCA, and what issues are stakeholders bringing up where they're saying, look, you have policy differences between some of these agencies, and it's really creating issues for us at the local level or regional level because we can't meet both policies, or we're getting mixed messages, or whatever that thing is, or we need consolidated technical assistance on issue X in order to be able to efficiently move our communities forward on that issue. It'll be a forum where we'll be able to say, hey, multiple state agencies, here's this thing we'd like to work on, and it'll be a forum to do that. Before, we would have had to really run around and say, hey, can you work on this issue? Hey, can you work on this issue? And like do that with lots of different departments and try to herd cats, which would have been really tough. It would have taken a lot of resolve on everyone's part. But I think with this committee forum, I think it will be a lot more natural. In other places like Michigan, they've used this kind of a structure to produce some innovative incentive programs for development that are consistent with policies that the state's trying to promote, that I think could be an interesting option for people to look at as well. Other benefits is we can combine forces on, I'm looking at Ashley right now, like things like data, like multiple programs in MOCA have really interesting data sets that all apply to communities, and how can we be mindful of how we're all bringing data to the table, and how can we make it easy to use? I mean, you can imagine all the ways that a combined program like this could be innovative and helpful. And so it's going to take us a little while to figure all this out. We have a number of charges from the legislature this fall and winter: Growth Management Act stakeholder process, housing rules to go with the new housing legislation. There's just a number of things that we'll be working through as we're also building our structure. But I am interested in keeping an eye on the long term here and what we're building toward. So I really value it when people who are at the local or regional level tell me, hey, we think this need is more important than this other need, or have you heard X from people that this is something that's a barrier for them and their community's development. And so I would really welcome feedback. So with that brief outline, could we ask for folks to either point to particular topics that they'd like me to address more, or feedback that they'd like to give us, or discussion they'd like to have as a group?
This is kind of a softball probably, but not something that we've talked about, you and I at least. And it's because and this is very out-facing part of MoCA is the MoCA website. And you know, programs are continuing to operate off the current websites, sort of like, I don't know, if folks have, connections to our website, links to our website, TA material, all that kind of stuff that they're using now, or data, what's the process, the plan, the timeline, maybe?
Yep, that's a great question. So we just got the contract signed with Informe and we have dates and stuff for the new homepage. And so that is right around the end of October, beginning of November. We'll be able to be really testing our new homepage so that by that mid-November date, we'll be prepared to have people hitting that. The programs will need to move over sort of one at a time. So there will be some MoCA programs where they'll still be operating on their old website for a little while. Our aim is to have that all done within about 6 months, to have all the programs moved over. In the meantime, we're going to have pages it'll be the home page, and then there'll be one page for each program that explains what the program does and who the staff are, and then takes you to that existing homepage that's going to need to be moved over. So it'll be a little bridge to where the homepage lives right now. This is purely because of capacity issues. So last October, I started as the director, and until the spring, I was the only employee of the organization. And I was also working on our budget and our legislation related to growth management and all the other things. So this is really just the fact that we just recently hired a communications person and all of that. So that's the timing. You'll see some change in early November, and then we will hopefully in about 6 months or so have everything totally transitioned over.
Thank you. That's gonna, it's gonna be a question we'll get over time. You know what I mean? So people just be patient, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'll try not to do anything too confusing.
Yeah, let's make that a goal. Let's not be confusing. All right, can folks tell me what you think MoCA could be helpful with? Like, what's high priority for you? You've been watching state government for years and thinking, oh my gosh, it would be so much better, more coordinated, simpler, whatever, if state government did X. Please tell me what X is.
There's gotta be something here. Or maybe state government didn't do X, right?
Right.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I think just working for a transportation, engineering, and infrastructure business now, we're very interested in resilient infrastructure and opportunities to incorporate that into our work. So really interested about what's going on with the Resilience Office, as well as a couple other, well, everything you're doing, to be honest. So.
Okay, I can talk a little bit about how the Resilience Office is structured and what the funding sources is and what that means for the future, and then how we're, so Brian Ambrette is the director of the State Resilience Office, which is within MoCA. And so I talk with him about his plans, but he will be the expert on the State Resilience Office projects. And so there may be some things that I will defer to him on. But so there are currently, from the $69 million NOAA CRRC grant, there are 4 full-time staff and 2 NOAA fellows that are in the State Resilience Office. And those folks are in positions that will last at least through the end of the NOAA grant. So I think it's 2030. or in that like 2029. And they'll be carrying out the deliverables in the NOAA grant, as well as coordinating on some other pieces. In the State Resilience Office, there's also the Community Resilience Partnership that moved over just last week from the GoPIF, and the floodplain program that moved over from DACF last week as well. Also in the State Resilience Office will be 2 positions that are funded through the LD1 money for flooding prevention. And those positions we're waiting for hiring approval for. And as soon as we get the hiring approval, for those of you who are in state government, we're still waiting for the FJAs. And then once those are approved, we'll go ahead and hire for those 2 positions. And then that will be the State Resilience Office as it's currently conceived. There are quite a few large projects that Brian is strategizing on how to move forward. There are things like improved flood data. There's tools for understanding inland flood risk. There's a number of things there that it's going to take a few months for him to sort out sort of the process of planning for and starting the procurement for those really big projects that are, you know, $1 million plus projects. But in the meantime, the State Resilience Office and CRP are continuing to operate the resilience grants. They still have funding both from the general fund and from NOAA, the CRRC grant. We've had no indication that that grant is going away, so they'll continue to have slightly larger funding rounds for several years because of that NOAA CRRC grant. And so I think you can expect a similar trajectory as before on CRP grants. In addition, we now have someone in the office, one of the positions I mentioned before, who's coordinating the regional coordinator network. So the regional coordinators that are embedded in each of the regional planning organizations that help communities apply for CRP and also learn about other kinds of resources and technical assistance. That coordinator network has someone who's dedicated to working with them now. We will be standing up, once the LD1 positions are hired, we will be standing up a similar network for flood prevention. So certified floodplain managers in each region and someone at MOCA to coordinate them. So those positions that are in the regional offices are hired by the regions. MOCA does a pass-through of money as a contract to those regions to hire those folks that are, and then we have the coordinator, like the coordinator of the coordinators in MOCA. So I think you'll see over time, as we get some of this deployed, more and more and more robust technical assistance at the regional level, more sort of data availability at the state level, and it'll build over the next couple of years. So I think in a couple of years it'll look pretty different, and you'll see a lot more resources on the ground than you do today. Matt, did I address what you were hoping to hear about, or is there more that you'd like to hear?
No, you covered everything I asked and more. That was very helpful.
Okay, great.
I'll ask a quick question.
Great, Suzanne.
And I like to play the I'm new here card. So where does the Maine Geo Library live? And like, how does that relate to the work MOCA will do, or the different groups within MOCA as a, planner and GIS person? When you're talking about data, that sort of popped into my mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we will need to be coordinating with the Geo Library and OIT broadly about these projects that we'll be doing. I actually, I don't want to, if you're not comfortable with it, that's totally fine. But Ashley, you work with the Geo Library on a regular basis. Would you be interested in giving us a little bit of context there?
Sure. I don't actually know where they're housed, so if you want to answer that question, go ahead. But
That's a
I have been talking with Jay quite a bit. Jay Clark runs the Geo Library. He is very interested in working with our program as well as the regional councils as far as data sharing and getting projects moving in the future. So I think it'll be a very interesting partnership.
I mean, I think they're their own thing. I don't know if they sit within another agency. So if someone knows, please feel free to speak up. But we tend to interact with them as an entity and not so much as a part of another agency. So it's possible, but I don't really know. I do know that there's a real emphasis. So when we've been putting in like forms to hire people, OIT does look them over and say, hey, is this a function that actually should live in OIT? Is this a geo-library function? And so there's a effort within state government to make sure that people who are running the technical systems stay in the technical agencies, and that people who are dealing with the content and helping connect the technical systems with the users are in the agencies that are dealing with the content, like MoCA.
Thanks.
Sure. We know that there's there's a lot of efforts to develop data right now that we're going to have to be cognizant of how they all come together in the end. So for example, Housing Opportunity Program, which is in MoCA, is working with GPCOG and all the regions to help facilitate the collection of housing data per the recent law. And there's also, the Zoning Atlas Project, which is not a creature of state government. And there's lots of, and I think the Land Bank has launched an effort to do some data collection. And so there's a lot of these efforts that it's really helpful if we're talking on a regular basis to make sure that they're not duplicative and heading in a coordinated direction. Fortunately, Maine is a small enough state that I do think there's some general awareness of what's out there for efforts, but we always welcome people telling us about something that's happening that we might not know about, so we can factor that into the plans. I really want MoCA to be something that is doing work that really only state government could do and not trying to duplicate effort for service providers or regions. Our role really can be around providing a backbone of information and a backbone of services so that all the regions and the individual service providers out there don't need to reconstruct or like create from scratch. So technical assistance and information about like who does what or some kind of directory, like those are things that when they're centralized, they're helpful, and then everybody else can use them. We're not trying to be the organization that goes and talks to each municipality or tribe and tries to help them individually, because we recognize that's often done better at a local or regional level. Juliana?
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be so helpful, even just to show, on somehow all the amazing collaborations and coordination, because I think you were literally eavesdropping on my discussion today with our director about it'd be so great to know about all these different policy and programs that are in initiative and cooperation. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And we are looking into that formally, like how could we set up an information tool that helps make a lot of these networks visible. So a group of MoCA staff have done quite a bit of work on thinking about what would it take to have a tool like that would let people who are in regions or who are relatively sophisticated users could come into the tool and say, who else is working on this thing I'm working on? Or who provides this kind of service in this region, so that they can help communities find the resources that they need. And we've gotten to the point where we have sort of an outline of what we think it might look like. We've gotten an initial analysis and estimate from the Rue Institute on what it would take to build it. And we're thinking about, what does all that mean? Is it the right fit for it to live in state government, or would it be better living with a partner? How do we get it funded? You know, all of the reality pieces are sort of the next step. But we do see, it seems like everywhere I go and I speak to people about this and I ask them, you know, what are you seeing? Pretty much everyone says, it used to be the case that we kind of all knew what each other was doing, but there's just too many nodes in the network now to have that all in our heads. There's so much good work going on that we sort of need a more formal way to keep track of the activity that's happening in Maine. And because of the federal situation, as resources start to shrink and we need to be extra sure we're not duplicating each other's work, that's going to be even more important to be able to figure out who else is doing a similar thing and then partner with them instead of compete with them. So that's part of the goal as well. There's also an equity goal with it, because you know, as someone who's been in Maine for decades now and worked in Maine state government, I started in Maine state government in 1999. I did take a break to step away in other roles for a while, but I have in my head like a certain set of folks who I can send people to for certain services, like people I've interacted with, firms I've interacted with, but I don't know what I don't know. And I feel like folks who are just trying to get started or maybe aren't part of the formal networks don't get as much of a shot at some of these opportunities because I don't know and my colleagues don't know to refer people to them. And so I think if we have a directory of some kind that makes all of these nodes in the network visible, it provides a better opportunity for people who are either just getting started or aren't as connected to the formal network. So I think it serves an equity purpose as well. All right, what else? What else do you want to tackle today? You can ask me hard questions too. Like if there are sticky issues out there that you want to talk about, I don't mind. It's fine.
I think I got one, if I can have a second one here.
Yeah.
And I think only because some of the folks on this call may be called upon at some point. Rulemaking, the future of rulemaking for MoCA, and I'm sure there's way more than what's in my head, but I think everyone on the call knows of a potential growth management law rulemaking down the road, and that may be something to talk about. But what other rulemaking? Because that's the only, that nothing else is really on my radar, but I can imagine a lot of other programs have rulemaking. As you know, our rules still say state planning office in them in the text, and they just haven't been updated in that long because it is that complicated and that can be difficult. I mean, and some of the players in here will want to be right on top of that process. Hopefully some of them will.
Yep. All right, good question. So the housing rulemaking that implements some of the recent changes that the legislature made this last session is out for comment now. It was just released, and I think the comment period ends at the end of the month. So the Housing Opportunity Program, Hillary Gove is the contact person for that, and the draft rule is available. And please comment on it if that's of interest to you. The growth management rule is a major substantive rule that we're going to have a stakeholder process that will start this fall. There will be more information coming about that shortly. And then we'll most likely be writing the text of the rule in the spring. And so we'll have a comment period on that maybe next summer or something like that. But because it's major substantive, nothing will go into effect until the legislature reviews it and approves it. And the earliest that really could happen, as far as I can tell, would be January of 27. So I don't think there's anything imminent other than the stakeholder group will get started. And that's an important, obviously it's very important to a lot of people. And so we will try to be as transparent as possible about that. And I'll also be, there's a informational session tentatively planned at the HED committee about what MOCA is up to and about the subdivision law that there was a bill in the last session to do a study group about the subdivision law that was carried over, and the HED committee is having a informational session on that as well as a MOCA update. I think it's October 22nd. And so that's another thing that people might be interested in keeping an eye on. I think that it's important to note that this is sort of along the lines of your question, Tom. It's a little straying, but one of the lovely things that happened when the legislature passed the budget that enacted all these moves to MOCA is they changed how some of the programs can do grant rounds. So in the past, some of the programs like HOP had to do rulemaking about how they were going to give grants out, and they had to follow the formal process for procurement, like RFPs and stuff. Whereas like MPAP did not have to do that because there was language in MPAP statute and also CRP that said you have permission to ignore the purchasing rules and do it differently based on a program statement. And so you can see the difference in sort of the formality level of, for those of you who've participated in those various programs, of what you have to do to get CRP funding versus what you have to do to get HOP funding. And that's not because of that's the preferences of the staff. That was actually a legal constraint. But now the language in our statute allows all of the MOCA programs to follow that sort of friendlier process that doesn't require rulemaking and doesn't require the RFP process when giving out grants. And so I think that's a huge win for making it easier for communities and service providers to apply for grants. Oh, thanks, Joan, for posting the subdivision law in the chat, or subdivision law group in the chat. So it's sort of related to rulemaking in the sense that we'll probably have to do less rulemaking in the future, which is really a plus. I'm trying to think if I know of any other programs in MOCA that are doing rulemaking right now. Nothing's coming to mind. I mean, the codes folks may periodically have rulemakings to update MUBEC, but they've just finished a big code adoption. So at this point, I think any changes hopefully would be relatively minor for a little while. But of course, we don't know what's going to come out of the next legislative session either. Maybe we'll be tasked with more things that will require rulemaking.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Erica at AvCog. I was hoping that we could potentially talk a little bit more about the floodplain manager coordinator position and just the expectation around that, how you see that kind of playing out. Just curious.
Sure. So for those who might not be familiar with how LD1 got started, I'll just give a brief history and then we'll go to Erica's specific question. So LD1 was passed in the spring with bipartisan support. It was endorsed by all 4 leaders in the legislature and the governor. And it took money from the Bureau of Insurance fund. So when someone registers to be a insurance agent, or I don't know what the technical term in Maine is, but when you get a license effectively from the Bureau of Insurance, you have to pay a fee. And that fee revenue adds up because people who don't work in Maine but work in other places but want to be able to sell policies in Maine also pay that fee. So it's more than you might think, and it turned into millions of dollars. And so through the Resilience Commission, there was an initiative to move forward distributing some of that money to programs that will help prevent losses through preventing flood damage and improving resilience for Maine communities and homeowners. And so there's several components to that bill. One of them is grants directly to homeowners that deal with strengthening roofs and preventing like basement flooding, that sort of thing. That's being led by the Bureau of Insurance. There's also some pieces that are related to MEMA and better emergency communications, and also providing match for some of the federal funding that MEMA could potentially draw down. And then there's this piece for MOCA. And the piece for MOCA is like $9 million-ish, I think, plus a couple of ongoing positions. And so some of that money is going to go towards improving flood maps and improving tools so people can understand where flooding is going to occur. But some of it is going to be put directly into the positions that Erica was talking about, which is in each region having a certified floodplain manager. So they'll have to be a qualified individual who has been certified as a floodplain manager, and that will be done by a grant to each RPO. And we will have a position that is in MOCA that coordinates that program, so that we'll be working with the RPOs to do the contracting. We'll be sort of setting expectations for what we're hoping each region will do with that position. And so I think the program, the exact expectations will be worked out once we have someone in that position and they can talk with the regions and do some discussion around what exactly that will look like. But the idea is similar to the CRP regional coordinators, where as communities have questions or issues about how they can improve their resilience to flooding, that they'll have someone at the regional level to call on who can point them to resources, can give them advice, can work with them on applications for funding, can help them figure out what their next steps are, so that we have someone who's got that certification without each town having to have someone with that certification. I know some counties are all over this and really have a good handle on it, and others less so. There's some unevenness across the state. So in some places, that regional coordinator may already have strong partners in the region with, say, a county EMA, and in some cases not. So the exact duties of that, I imagine, I'm projecting here, but I think probably there may have to be some flex depending on what flood prevention resources there already are in any given region, so that we're not duplicating services that already exist. Erica, is that along the lines of what you were looking for, or is there something else I can answer?
That was really helpful. Thank you. And I
No
just, as a regional council staff, I do think that position will be really helpful to the municipality. So I'm very excited about that one for sure.
Great. Joan?
Sorry. I just want to, there may be some confusion perhaps with the regional planners about the contract amendment that we'll be issuing, MHAPA will be issuing. We have funding from FEMA for one planner at each regional council to take the Association of State Floodplain Managers Floodplain Management 101 training. That's lesser training. That's a high level program that is an online self-directed course, but it doesn't get you to the certification that Samantha was just talking about. So there's opportunity through both of these programs to really increase the regional capacity relative to floodplain management.
Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm gonna ask it's not provocative, but like I hope a few people actually answer it. You could, when you think about the services, the connected housing, land use, code enforcement, coastal, and let's not forget Volunteer Maine. They're part of MOCA now too. So they're our Maine's AmeriCorps program, but they also have a state mandate to help with building volunteer capacity in the state. And so they do training of people who manage volunteers. and there's a number of services they offer, and they think about volunteerism as a force multiplier. And so they're an important component of our strategy, because as we think about projects that can be put on the ground, how can we build volunteer capacity so that it's sustains into the future, even when there might no longer be a paid position available, or their circumstances may change, or a project may nominally end, but you want to keep the energy going. How do you engage volunteers? So that's a key component of MOCA as well. But when you think about all the things that we might do, like if you could change one thing, if you could wave your wand and state government in these capacities could be doing one thing differently, what would your wish be?
I can go if no one else is going to say anything, and I am going to immediately say assistance with code enforcement. It's just one of the biggest problems in APCOG's region. And I know even now there's some code enforcement officers who were doing 5 towns who are now leaving the profession. So there are just a lot of gaps. And I know that's, it's one of the biggest pieces because just the enforcement isn't there. So my overall wish forever will be more code enforcement assistance.
That's a great point, Erica. I hear that a lot too. You're definitely not alone. I saw Juliana give a applause to your comment. And the situation we're in is that we thought we had a $7 million grant to improve code capacity, and that was in conditional award status so it was the GEO, it was the Governor's Energy Office at the time, now Department of Energy Resources, that had obtained that. It was in conditional award status when the administration change occurred, and it has not been heard from since. So we're becoming pessimistic about getting that funding. And then we applied for BRIC grant, and then we all know how that went. And so now we're looking at our options again. And I think several of the working groups that are happening this fall, based on legislation that was passed in the last session, are also turning up that issue of code capacity. So we're moving forward on a plan to spend some of the reserve account on temporary capacity while this gets figured out. But we are hoping to bring on an additional person on contract for a little while, just to give Greg Gilbert, the state building official, some additional staffing behind him. But it's been this frustrating process of like applying for and then losing money. I heard that there's the regional effort is still going forward. I think it's with KV Cog and the leader in the lead.
Yep.
And so I'm excited to learn more about that. But it feels like something that in 2026 we really need to figure this out and get it going. Especially in rural areas, it's such a significant need.
Exactly. Well, I'm happy to hear that the conversation has not ended, regardless of the funding opportunities. So that's great to hear.
Thank you for bringing that up. All right, who else has a magic wand? Oh, come on. You all want something. What do you want?
I want the funding for municipal comp plan grants to come back.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Okay.
But all the dollar figures that you're saying are much, much, much more than I would ever expect. So I'll just take a small piece of something else. I'd be happy with that. I think they used to be when that ended in 2006. I think our total was like 200 grand, 220,000 total.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
It is unfortunate that we've got these pots of money for single issue planning, and then we don't have funding for planning, for comp planning. And it's something that's very much on my mind. I totally agree with you, Tom.
I'll just chime in there and go back to that data discussion, that like anything we can do to like, I don't know if centralize is the right word, but just make it easier to consolidate and have like standardized data for those projects. That tends to be the part where it becomes really onerous and expensive and time consuming for communities, regardless of who's doing it. So having sort of a standard place or system for the information that we're using to sort of expedite that process. That is my magic wand dream.
And is that specific to comp planning, or are there other types of planning that you are referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot in comp planning, but other, housing analyses work that we do. We tend to see communities that really want to, well, they always want like real-time information, and then they also want like data sets that don't necessarily currently exist, especially around where we are, like the use of properties, residential properties for lodging. So, yeah, but that to me, that's like a huge need, and it helps inform legislative work too. So,
Okay, thank you. Noted. And I think that in general, people are having a hard time getting their arms around how to distinguish between collecting, well, there's a lot that we could do with data and data collection, but sometimes it's hard to apply the same standard to many different kinds of communities. I think that's part of what we'll wrestle with in the growth management stakeholder group, is how do we think about when it makes sense to have standardized data, when does it, if we're asking communities for that, when does it make sense for them to contribute to standardized data? And it's I hear from other entities too. I was talking with another entity who's applying for a grant to think about what data makes sense to collect, what's missing, what could we help communities subsidize collection of or perform it for them. And then, like I said, the land bank has been doing a lot of work on what data is available, what could be made available. I think it's on a lot of people's minds. So Suzanne, if you run across efforts that you think are helpful to highlight with regard to that, or if you think there are specific issues that crop up that might not be obvious, please let us know, because I think it's going to be a continuing discussion for a while.
for sure. I mean, I have found the housing data portal to be great and helpful, and the housing affordability index. I know the rental data is not happening right now, but I think those kinds of tools are really helpful, even if that's the starting point, and you do dig deeper and peel back the onion more locally. Those are great examples.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see a comment in the chat from Michael. Are we making a distinction between code enforcement and admin review? And in the under 4,000 towns, before we get to actual enforcement, we need to get a handle on application review and admin. Is this something MOCA has on its radar and may take on? That's a great question. And so, yes, I think we are making the distinction. Some of the legislative discussion in this past session was about the admin review component and whether towns are aware of standard processes to go through. So there was that requirement that came out about towns officials needing to go through training. That's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the resources that the towns would need in order to do admin review consistently. I think in some cases the two do blend, however, because so many code enforcement officers end up sort of de facto being the admin review for the town, whether that's really the proper role or not. And so the more that we can help code enforcement officers have appropriate information about admin review, they can help just inform the town staff, if there's our staff or select board or whomever might need to know that information. So it's important not to automatically put that review responsibility on CEOs, but I think we have to recognize that a lot of times by default they end up saddled with being caught between someone in the town who might not be a paid staff person, who might not totally understand the admin review process, and the homeowner, and the CEO is sometimes right in the middle, which can be an awkward place for them to be if there's no resources for them to sort through that issue. But I would welcome if people have a different take on that, or if you want to particularly amplify any part of that, please, is there anyone who would like to further comment on that? Because a lot of you are closer to this issue than I am.
Here I am again.
Erica,
But
yeah, I know you want to say something.
I can't help myself. No, I agree with you in the sense that for most of the municipalities in AvCog's region, they don't have anybody besides a code enforcement officer, and say planning board or select board. In most cases, they can't even keep people on the planning board. So I do have to say that in a lot of cases, it seems that any sort of, you know, permit, development review, anything does get pushed over to code enforcement in a lot of cases, in my area at least. So I agree with that for certain. I did have a question on the planning board training. I'm assuming that you guys are going to put together like guidance as far as what exactly you're looking to see for that. But happy to report that a lot of municipalities have already reached out to me about doing that, which I thought was a great thing. So,
Oh, good. That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Joan, do you want to say a little bit about what you're planning on that front?
Sure, we're going to my brain went in a million different directions. So we are going to put guidance out about what we think municipalities should be doing to meet that requirement in LD 1829. The training that we are looking at is procedural, it's process oriented, not topic oriented. So I've had requests, can we build into whatever the training parameters are, having planning boards and boards of appeals be aware of topical issues, whether it's environmental or transportation or whatever it might be. That's not the direction that I think is intended by this legislation. I think it's more about rules, process, procedure, legal issues, ex parte communications being an example, board behavior, what's appropriate in a public forum, in private settings. What does it mean to be a board member, and what are the legal ramifications for decisions? How do they make decisions? So all of those process-oriented considerations that board members can get right now by going through the Maine Municipal Association training. But I don't want to go in a direction where we're precluding board members from participating in existing trainings like the Maine Municipal Association's trainings. If regional councils want to offer trainings, I want to make sure that we're providing a framework foundation for what you might be presenting to them as minimums. And likewise, if there are municipalities that want training from their municipal attorney, I want to make sure that those options are all available, and that we're not directing municipalities to only one way or another, or one entity from which they can get their board members trained in order to satisfy the requirement. So the legislation is pretty open-ended, but I want to make sure that we're allowing for flexibility to meet the municipal officials' needs.
And thank you, Joan. And just to put a finer point on that, that there's nothing in statute that further defines what that is. We're not intending to do rulemaking on it. So what we put out truly will be guidance. And it'll, if someone decides that as a citizen, they think that their board wasn't adequately trained, I think they wouldn't be appealing to us. It would be probably a matter for the courts. And so we'll put out guidance, but just do remember that it's not something that is a mandatory from us. We're just trying to be helpful more than anything. And then Patricia, your comment when you say I agree, How can MoCA make sure state goals don't overlook the realities of smaller rural towns? Which thing were you agreeing with, so I can comment on that?
That was following up with Susan with comp plans.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's a real question that the stakeholder group is going to have to wrestle with is how do you acknowledge the differences in capacities between towns without also creating a situation where, because a small town doesn't have capacity, they end up having a set of requirements that aren't actually meaningful. And kind of threading that needle is going to be something that we're going to need a lot of good brains on. So, Tom, I know we're a little past 1. I'm happy to take, if other folks have more questions or comments, I'm more than happy to stay a little longer, but I also want to recognize that everyone may have other things they need to go do.
No, this has been great. This is the way I wish all of our meetings would go, with the interaction back and forth. Yeah, if anyone has questions, and of course you can always email Samantha, find her contact right on the MoCA website, or me, and I can try to answer it.
And we have our new generic address, right? We have info.moca.
Oh yes, right, correct. Yep. All right. So if no one has any other questions, I don't want to cut anyone off here. But yeah, we're at 1, and I think we covered a lot of ground. And it's kind of stressful to think about how much there is to do. So just a quick reminder to folks, we will not be having a November meeting, and I'll probably send a reminder as it gets closer. We'll have a December meeting. We'll find a topic. Feel free to send topics on to me at any time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And
Thank
Sam,
you.
I'm really grateful you're coming to Planning Day. So thank you so much for that too.
My pleasure. See you then.